President Trump is also drawing fire for his positive comments about Vladimir Putin. In a Fox interview, the U.S. president says he respects the Russian president and wants to work with him.
I respect a lot of people, but that doesn't mean I'm going to get along with him. He's a leader of his country. I say it's better to get along with Russia than not. And if Russia helps us in the fight against ISIS, which is a major fight, and Islamic terrorism all over the world,
right,
major fight, that's a good thing. Will I get along with him? I have no idea. It's very
He's a
possible
killer,
I
though.
won't.
Putin's a killer.
A lot of killers. We got a lot of killers. Why, you think our country's so innocent?
Even Republicans are taking issue with that. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell calls Putin, quote, a thug, and says there's no comparison between how Russia and the U.S. conduct themselves.
The president is wading into the controversy about voter fraud yet again, standing by those false claims that 3 to 5 million illegal votes were cast last year. Mr. Trump now says Vice President Mike Pence will lead the investigation, heading a special commission.
We're going to move on to the latest from President Trump. His comments defending Vladimir Putin, comparing the U.S. to Russia, have sparked a backlash from Democrats and Republicans as the legal battle over his travel ban intensifies. New court rulings could come as early as tonight. Our senior White House correspondent Cecilia Vega tracking it all. Good morning, Cecilia.
George, good morning to you. This new White House could be on its way to a Supreme Court showdown, but that travel ban is hardly the only controversy this morning. The president under fire for those comments about Vladimir Putin from even those in his own party. The president and first lady hosting a Super Bowl bash in Florida, complete with cheerleaders and a marching band. But it is an interview he did with Fox's Bill O'Reilly before the big game that has ignited a big controversy. President Trump coming to Vladimir Putin's defense, saying he respects the Russian leader.
I do respect him.
Do you? Why?
Well, I respect a lot of people, but that doesn't mean I'm going to get along with him. He's a leader of his country. I say it's better to get along with Russia than not. And if Russia helps us in the fight against ISIS, which is a major fight, and Islamic terrorism all over the world,
right,
major fight, that's a good thing. Will I get along with him? I have no idea. It's very
He's a
possible
killer,
I
though.
won't.
Putin's a killer.
A lot of killers. We got a lot of killers. Why, you think our country's so innocent?
There was bipartisan backlash, Republicans pouncing.
There is no moral equivalency between the United States of America, the greatest freedom-loving nation in the history of the world, and the murderous thugs that are in Putin's defense of his cronyism.
And now this morning, a battle on another front. Travel restrictions still on hold, and foreign nationals from those 7 majority Muslim countries now entering the U.S. President Trump angrily responding, firing off tweets Sunday saying, just cannot believe a judge would put our country in such peril. If something happens, blame him and court system. People pouring in, bad. In another tweet, the president called him a so-called judge. This is the judge drawing President Trump's ire, James Robart.
The state has met its burden of demonstrating that it faces immediate and irreparable injury.
Robart agreed with the Washington State Attorney General that businesses, universities, and the state's tax base would be damaged by Trump's order.
The order is illegal and is causing serious immediate harms to our states, to our state institutions, and to our people.
But the Trump administration says the states and the court have overreached their powers.
Because this is an area where Congress has delegated authority to the president to make these determinations. It's the president that gets to make the determinations, and the court doesn't have authority to look behind those determinations.
SNL having a field day, now taking aim at White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer. Yeah, Spicer's calling that skit cute and funny, but he says he would rather be focusing on issues. The big issue right now, of course, that travel ban. Nearly 100 tech companies from Apple to Google filing a court brief against it. And now former Secretaries of State Madeleine Albright and John Kerry are weighing in. George and Robin, they say the ban harms national security.
Okay, let's look at the law and the politics now with Dan Abrams and Matthew Dowd. Dan, let me begin with you. What's at issue today? It's going to go back to the appeals court tonight. They could make a ruling as early as tonight, just on whether or not this travel ban should stay on hold.
That's right. District court rules temporary restraining order. No one has decided on the ultimate merits of the law yet. The question is, do they need to immediately stop it? That's what this judge did nationwide. So now the government is appealing to the appellate court, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals there, saying we would like that particular ruling overturned. So all we're fighting about for now is the limited question of, do we need to stop it immediately as we wait to evaluate the broader issues
And even
involved?
that could go to the Supreme Court.
Absolutely. No, look, if in either case, if the Ninth Circuit, however the Ninth Circuit rules, expect some sort of appeal. The big question, of course, is, does the Supreme Court take it? Everyone seems to think, oh, well, it's obviously going to go to the Supreme Court. Yeah, it's obviously going to get to the Supreme Court, but that doesn't mean the Supreme Court's going to agree to hear the case.
Right. It takes 5 votes to hear the case.
Yeah.
Okay, Dan Abrams.
And I know, Matt, you have had an opposing view about this, but let me tell you, Cecilia Vega in that report, we saw, of course, the Twitter attacks continuing with the federal judge.
Well, I'll never oppose Dan Abrams on legal stuff, so I'll let him, if he doesn't oppose me on political stuff. As I was watching the excitement surrounding the Super Bowl, I was thinking about a whole new group of patriots. Not football fans and not football players, but founders of the Constitution, who I think would be looking at the last 72 hours in befuddlement and watching what's happened, watching the question on checks and balances, watching it sort of seems a lack of understanding about what our constitutional values are in this. I think it's amazing to me that Donald Trump has criticized a federal judge who was appointed by George W. Bush, who's a Republican constitutionalist, more than he has Vladimir Putin.
And could those comments about Vladimir Putin, could those hurt him?
I think they already are. I think what you're seeing for the first time, the break in the Republican wall, I think they have been united behind him in the first part of his presidency. But as you watched Les George's interview yesterday with Senator Sass and other Republicans, for the first time, a huge amount of Republicans are coming out and say, you cannot make a moral equivalency between Vladimir Putin and the United States of America. And I think it's upset everybody from across partisanship.
It does appear that.
President Trump took steps on Friday to begin dismantling the Dodd-Frank financial regulations that were put into place following the economic crash of 2008. Take a listen to President Trump talking with Jamie Dimon, the CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase.
So many people, friends of mine, that have nice businesses, they can't borrow money, they just can't get any money because the banks just won't let them borrow because of the rules and regulations and Dodd-Frank, so we'll be talking about that.
You have long called for stronger banking regulation. There is this study by the Harvard Kennedy School of Government that found that community banks were having a difficult time complying with the regulations in Dodd-Frank. Do you see any upside at all to relaxing any of the Dodd-Frank regulations?
You know, it is hard not to laugh to see President Trump alongside these Wall Street guys. I have to say this, Jake, and I don't mean to be disrespectful. This guy is a fraud. This guy ran for president of the United States saying, Donald Trump, I'm going to take on Wall Street. These guys are getting away with murder. Then suddenly he appoints all of these billionaires. His major financial advisor comes from Goldman Sachs, and now he's going to dismantle legislation that protects consumers. This is a guy who ran for president saying, I'm the only Republican. I'm not going to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And then he appoints all of these guys who are precisely going to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. So I hope that all of those folks who voted for Mr. Trump because he thought that he would stand up for working people, man, this guy is, he's a good showman. I will give you that. He's a good TV guy. But I think he's going to sell out the middle class and the working class of this country and that business on Wall Street. He told us, in fact, it's in the Republican platform, he is going to bring back Glass-Steagall. We're going to be dividing up commercial banks from investor banks from insurance companies. Then he has all of the big Wall Street guys on his side, and now he's working for Wall Street.
But Senator Sanders, while you very strongly made the case throughout the campaign after Hillary Clinton got the nomination that President Trump would do this, and that even though he was using some of the same rhetoric you used when it came to Wall Street, not to believe him and trust him, there were a lot of Sanders supporters out there who I think believed President Trump, then candidate Trump, partly because there had been so many accusations of Hillary Clinton being so tied to Wall Street.
Well, here's my only point, Jake. Look, it is one thing if you run a campaign that says, look, I think Wall Street's great. I think the drug companies are great. I think we have to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And if people want to vote for that, that's fine. That's democracy. But you have a president who I think in a totally fraudulent campaign said that I'm going to stand up for the working people. Look at his cabinet. We've never had more billionaires in a cabinet in the history of this country. Look at his appointees. These are people who are going to go after the needs of working families, the elderly, the children, the sick, and the poor. That is called hypocrisy. And by the way, I think people like Mitch McConnell, who you just had on, who is a mainstream conservative politician, are going to be put into a very, very difficult place. And I would hope that people like Senator McConnell and other Republicans have the courage to stand up, A, to Trump's movement toward authoritarianism, toward a situation where Trump says, everybody is terrible and wrong. I am the only guy who can protect the American people. You know what? Men and women in our military did not stand up and fight and die to lead us in the direction of an authoritarian society. We are a democracy, not a one-man show. We are not another Trump enterprise. It's called the United States of America. We're not a business run by Mr. Trump. And I hope that Senator McConnell, who's a decent guy, conservative guy, I disagree with him on everything. But I would hope that he and his Republican friends will make it clear to Trump that this country belongs to all of us and that it's not a one-man show.
Let me read from your Newsweek column. Let's put part of it on screen here. You said the media strategy is to show Trump as an inept and craven sociopath. The Trump strategy is to show that media people are hopeless prigs out of touch with the nation. And then you mentioned me. You said the media correspondent for CNN turns to the camera every Sunday morning and delivers a pious sermon about Trump's perfidiousness. I hope I pronounced that right. Tell me about that particular issue. Do you feel that my style is wrong or my substance is wrong, trying to fact check the president?
I think it's, and I mean this with truly no disrespect, but I think you can border on being sort of quite a ridiculous figure. It's not a good look to repeatedly and self-righteously defend your own self-interest. The media should not be the story. Every week, in this religious sense, you make it the story. We are not the story.
You don't think there's room for 1 hour a week on CNN for this?
Listen, I love your show. I just wish you wouldn't turn to the camera and lecture America about the virtues of the media and everyone trying to attack it. The media will be fine.
The media doesn't need defending in this moment?
The media does not need defending by the media, certainly.
Okay.
You know, and so far the media is, I mean, the New York Times front page looks like it's 1938 in Germany every day.
No, it does not. Give me a break.
The New Yorker is, as I say, has left all of its standards behind and now become, you know, an opinion vehicle constantly.
Senator, there's a big fight going on right now, as you know, about who will lead the Democratic National Committee. It's starting to shape up as something, a bit of a proxy battle between the Sanders wing and the Obama-Biden wing of the Democratic Party. When former Labor Secretary Tom Perez picked up the endorsement of former Vice President Biden, you said, Joe Biden is a friend of mine, but you went on to say that the question is simple. Do we stay with a failed status quo approach, or do we go forward with a fundamental restructuring of the Democratic Party? Is that what you think of Vice President Biden, that he represents a failed status quo approach?
Look, I like Joe, and I certainly have enormous respect for President Obama. But the facts are that despite the reality that we have an extreme right-wing Republican Party, which is way out of touch with the American people on every issue, they now control the White House, the Senate, the House, and 2/3 of the governor's chairs. If we continue along the same way, I think you're going to get the same results. So what I believe is we have got to open up the door of the Democratic Party. You got to bring in working people. You got to bring in young people. We got to raise money by small donations rather than being dependent on wealthier people. And I think we need to fundamentally change the way the Democratic Party does business and how it is prepared to stand up to the big money interest. You can't be on both sides. The Democratic Party has got to say, yeah, we're going to take on the greed of Wall Street, the greed of the pharmaceutical industry, the greed of corporate America that throws American workers out on the streets and moves to Mexico and China. We are on the side of the elderly and the workers, not on the side of big business. That's a decision that the Democratic Party has got to make. I think you know where I am on that.
inside that platform that she laid out before her enthusiastic supporters today, at the heart of it remains that crucial question of immigration. There was an awful lot of scaremongering in today's speech. The threats faced by French civilization itself. Would, she asked her audience, your children really even be still speaking French a few years from now? Have a listen to what she had to say about foreigners who come to France.
Those who came to France came to find France, not to turn it into their country of origin. If that's what they wanted, they should have stayed in their country.
So, what you really heard was that this threat of Islamist fundamentalism that she talked about a great deal, it dominated her speech here today, Zain, and it remains at the heart of the message that she's sending to the French. She's saying that the old cleavage of left and right is no longer relevant. What counts is those who are in favor of and have benefited from globalization, who are now confronted by what she referred to as patriots. And what she believes is that the time of French patriotism, she believes that that time has finally come.
The Socially Intelligent Interface, or SI, is a lightweight 3D printed robotic head. With LCD screens for eyes and a mouth, and a flexible neck, it can convey a number of easy-to-read expressions. Just how humans and robots interact is still a grey area. SI could help decipher this.
Certainly there's a lot of interest in using these sorts of robots as tools in psychology and trying to better understand, and answer some questions that remain in how we understand things like emotion, and to be able to test out concepts in psychology.
SI could eventually be mounted onto a mobile robot, such as this prototype, called Aerobot. In the lab at Trinity College Dublin, they're working on assistive robots to help the elderly or disabled increase their independence. Aerobot is mechanically simple, yet highly adaptive depending on the environment.
We've developed this system so that it can actually move in 4 different configurations, and it can transition quite easily between those 4 configurations. It allows us to do things like climbing steps. It allows us to do things like crossing gaps that we might need to if the robot needs to get on a train, for example.
An air muscle actuator helps control how the mass is distributed throughout the robot and improves safety.
We try and make stability something that the system defaults into. So if there is a problem, if the robot does break unexpectedly, that it defaults or it falls or it fails into a state that is going to do as little damage as possible.
The team says robots like Aerobot prove dynamic systems don't need to be extremely expensive or complex. While it's far from market-ready, the team says with each iteration they're improving on problems inherent to robot design. They're now working on their most advanced prototype to date, a full-sized humanoid assistive robot.
President Trump just a short time ago attacking the legal system for refusing to immediately restore his travel ban. A federal appeals court denying that request. President Trump at Mar-a-Lago tonight attacking the judge who initially issued the temporary restraining order, saying he's putting the country, quote, in peril. And Mr. Trump telling Homeland Security to check people very carefully at the airports. The president also raising eyebrows with his comments about the actions of Russian President Vladimir Putin, suggesting U.S. leaders aren't so innocent. Top Republicans breaking with the president on that issue, and ABC's David Wright starts us off.
Tonight, a legal showdown with tearful repercussions.
I didn't know how long it's going to take me to see my mother.
Families torn apart by Trump's abrupt targeted travel ban, racing to reunite, not sure how long the door will remain open. Today, Trump warned, I have instructed Homeland Security to check people coming into our country very carefully. The courts are making the job very difficult. The fate of Trump's controversial policy shutting the doors to visa holders from 7 predominantly Muslim countries is now in the hands of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Overnight, the appeals court rejected the administration's plea for an emergency ruling that would have reinstated the executive order, but a 3-judge panel is set to review the issue tomorrow. The Department of Justice argues the federal judge in Washington who lifted the ban improperly second-guessed the president's national security determinations, overstepping his judicial authority. Democrats are pushing back on that.
The president is not a dictator. The framers of our Constitution wanted a strong Congress for the very reason that most of these kinds of things should be done within the scope of lawmaking.
But Trump appears to see it differently, tweeting today, "Just cannot believe a judge would put our country in such peril. If something happens, blame him and court system. People pouring in, bad." Even some Republicans are expressing discomfort about the tone the president has set, especially with that tweet disparaging this so-called judge.
I'll be honest, I don't understand language like that. We don't have so-called judges. We don't have so-called senators. We don't have so-called presidents.
There's also mounting criticism of this exchange from Trump's interview with Fox News' Bill O'Reilly.
Do you respect Putin?
I do respect him.
Do you? Why?
Well, I respect a lot of people, but that doesn't mean I'm going to get along with them.
Putin's a killer.
A lot of killers. We got a lot of killers. Why, you think our country's so innocent?
Senator Marco Rubio blasted back. When has a Democratic political activist been poisoned by the GOP or vice versa? We are not the same as Putin. Vice President Mike Pence insists there's no moral equivalency, but he told George Stephanopoulos there's good reason to improve relations with Moscow.
Russia has a common interest in confronting radical Islamic terrorism and especially ISIS. And if we have opportunities to work together, I think the president is looking for an opportunity to begin that relationship anew.
Tonight, the president is hoping for a few hours break from it all. He told O'Reilly he'll be rooting for Tom Brady.
So I'll say the Patriots will win.
By how many points?
By 8 points.
Trump says he likes both teams, but Brady's his friend. And he said, you got to stick up for your friends.
David joins us live now. And David, this fight over the travel ban could affect the president in other ways, namely his pick for the Supreme Court.
That's right. Democrats have already signaled they'll have some tough questions for Judge Neil Gorsuch. They want to know, does he believe in checks and balances? Does he believe in an independent judiciary? And especially in the context of this legal fight, that could put him at odds with the president. Tom?
David Wright with the president in Palm Beach, Florida. David, thank you. The legal battle over the travel ban far from over, so let's bring in ABC Supreme Court contributor Kate Shaw. Kate, what happens next, and is this case headed to the Supreme Court?
So right now the case is in front of the Court of Appeals. Remember, since Friday night, this travel ban has been on hold, and the Trump administration is asking the Court of Appeals to reverse that, right, to let the ban go back into effect. If they lose in the Court of Appeals, that could happen quickly. There's briefing happening today and tomorrow, so the Court of Appeals could rule as quickly as Monday night or Tuesday. If the Trump administration tries to get the Supreme Court to intervene, it would actually take 5 votes in this situation for them to prevail. And you could then see that the fact that there's an 8-member court, remember, there's an absence because of Justice Scalia's death last year, could really work against the Trump administration.
We'll be staying on top of this story. All right, Kate, thanks.
Heavy snow has blanketed mountains and villages in Afghanistan and taken lives. In just a span of 3 days, over 100 people were killed in multiple avalanches triggered by heavy snowfall.
54 others have been injured. 168 homes have been completely destroyed and 18 homes have been partially destroyed, and due to the cold weather, around 350 animals have died.
Hard-hit areas were located mainly in central and northeastern provinces. The bulk of the civilian deaths occurred in remote Nuristan province, where at least 50 people were killed in a single village. Officials said extreme winter weather conditions had hampered rescuers trying to reach remote villages, raising fears that death toll could rise sharply. The government has declared Sunday a public holiday to prevent non-essential travel and ensure schools were closed. Airports in Kabul and Chitral district have also been closed. Heavy snowfall has also wreaked havoc on major roads in the country, including the Kabul-Kandahar Highway and the Salang Pass north of Kabul. Chuck Tinte, CGTN.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that he hopes the UK will join his country and the United States in lining up against Iran. Speaking ahead of his talks with UK Prime Minister Theresa May on Monday, Netanyahu said his visit to London should bring new opportunities for a unified consensus on Iranian missile launches.
בוגרי דאעש מפציפים את אירופה. יחד עם אירופה ויחד עם מדינות רבות, כולל מדינתכם, אנחנו משתפים פעולה על מנת לאתר כל מפגע אפשרי.
Et nous partageons aussi cette conviction que la bataille pour la sécurité est fondamentalement une bataille pour les libertés et pour la démocratie. Et nous faisons face également en Europe à une menace terroriste pour laquelle nous voulons prendre des engagements extrêmement solides et sérieux. Et c'est là pour laquelle nous souhaitons continuer à renforcer tous les modes de coopération entre les services de sécurité de notre pays et de votre pays.
Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is currently meeting with the British Prime Minister Theresa May in London. The two leaders are expected to cover topics such as increasing trade relations between the two countries after Brexit. May is also expected to restate concerns over Israel's settlement building in the West Bank. However, Benjamin Netanyahu likely hopes the talks will focus more on Iranian weapons, and reports say that he aims to seek a common front against Iran, which just has fired a ballistic missile. And this is the first time for the two leaders to meet in person. They did speak by telephone after May became Prime Minister last year.
An Afghan diplomat was shot dead in his country's consulate in Pakistan's southern city of Karachi just hours ago. Police said the consulate's third secretary was killed by a private guard who has since been arrested. Police added that the motive behind the killing is not clear and that the gunman was also an Afghan national. So Daniel, any update from the investigation now? And do we know at this point if the shooting is terrorism related?
Well, yes, it was the third secretary, like you mentioned, at the Afghan consulate in the southern city of Karachi, and the person has been identified as Mohammad Zaki. Now, according to initial reports, the guard named Hayatullah had some personal disagreements with Zaki, and there was a tussle between the two before Hayatullah opened fire with his automatic weapon and killed Zaki, and also injured another person who has been kept unidentified at this time. Now, incidentally, the guard is also an Afghan national, and according to the investigations, the police say this does not seem to be any act of terror, but still the investigations have been raised by the paramilitary troops, the Rangers, as well as the police, and we will come to know later in the day what the investigation yields.
那我给了，我可以拿回来吧？来，好，我再拿一个。哎呦，拿不起，拿不起。
Sunday evening protests at the famous Victoria Square in central Bucharest. They are into their sixth consecutive night, but unlike previous nights, police have kept a low profile and no major incidents were recorded. More than 100,000 came to celebrate government back down from the corruption decriminalization decree and to state new demands.
The government took back the ordinance, but they are very bad people. They wanted to promote corrupt people, to not let them go to jail and so on. So this is why the fact that they took back the ordinance is not enough.
We want our government to resign. It's a big shame. So democracy is all about the people. It's about to respect the people's wishes and cries on the streets. So we won't give up. We're still protesting. Hopefully we will gather all together here tonight and tomorrow too.
Protesters think that there is a link between the decree and ongoing charges against the leader of the ruling Social Democratic Party, and the fact that it had been an emergency decree further fueled anger, with the first night of protests last Tuesday ending in clashes with police.
Protests in Bucharest have sent strong shockwaves across the region because Romania does not hold exclusivity on corruption. It is a problem that strongly grips the entire region, so everybody around here are looking at Bucharest to see how this is going to end.
In neighboring Bulgaria, several hundreds of protesters gathered in front of the Romanian embassy in Sofia in support of those at Victoria Square. Corruption is their problem too.
So people expect from politicians that they should fight against corruption, that they should have some results in that fight. They are a little bit sick of all those phrases that they are committed to combat against corruption, but there are no results.
The calls for the government to resign has raised the stakes in the Romanian political standoff. Will the protesters lose steam, or will the government be forced to resign? It will be the one who blinks first. Aljoša Milenković, CGTN, Belgrade.